So thank you everyone for joining this tasting. And Elena, thank you very much for your time on this Friday night. We'll just get started, and it's so great to hear from you guys and see your faces. And I just thought that maybe Elena, you could start out by just telling us real quickly. I only have a half hour. I don't have like the pro Zoom, so we'll just try to keep it short and then give you guys time for some questions about the wines and sip them as we go. So Elena, tell us about your family and your winery real quick.
Yes, if I'm too long, please stop me. So anyway, I'm Elena Revello, and I'm part of the third generation of my family winery. It's me and my brother. Me and him, we are now managing a little bit of everything. We work with 11 hectares of land, mainly in Annunziata, which is a little neighborhood in La Morra. So 7 hectares are there, and 4 are in Serralunga d'Alba. The Barolo that some of you is trying is actually from Serralunga d'Alba. We have this spread situation because the vineyards in La Morra are from my father's side of the family, which is the part of the family that also started the winery. My grandpa was mainly selling grape. It was then my father and my uncle that really started to focus on winemaking and really started to focus on quality rather than quantity, because my grandpa, while selling the grape, was not really taking care of green harvest. He was letting the plants do his job without doing too much of selection, let's say. So everything started to change in the early 90s when my father took over the estate. And when we also started to have this label that we still have nowadays. Right now, we produce around 50 to 60,000 bottles. It depends, of course, on the weather condition. It's not the same every year. And we produce mainly Barolo or Nebbiolo-based wine. So we have a Langhe Nebbiolo, we have a Barolo Classico, and then we have 5 different single vineyard. We really like to do this job because we think Nebbiolo, it's really interesting because it's giving different characteristics depending on the soil composition, the microclimate, and so on.
Sorry, Elena, one quick thing. And you guys feel free to type in your questions or raise your hand or interrupt for questions. 4 of those 5 Barolos are from La Morra, correct? So
yes, exactly.
That really shows you how they show the terroir, because these single vineyards are pretty much all very close to your home and your winery, and just the one that we're drinking, the Cerretta, is the one exception that is coming from the different town.
Yes, exactly. So most of our land is actually pretty close to the winery. Let's say it's within 1 kilometer from our estate. Cerretta, so the one in Serralunga, it's the one a bit more far away, and well, it's not really far. I mean, it's less than 10 minutes by car, but it is kind of far away anyway. But it's really interesting to be able to work with different villages, because we got the chance really to see what the soil composition can do to the wine, because more or less the kind of work we do in the cellar is very similar for the wine. So the differences that we see are really from the nature. And the land in Serralunga is from my mom's side of the family. So this is why it's really far away from the estate. So actually, yeah, nowadays is around 11 hectares, and we are not selling grapes anymore. All what we are growing is used to make our own wine. As I was mentioning you before, mainly we produce Nebbiolo-based wine, but we also have Barbera. Some of you is actually sipping Barbera right now or planning to sip it.
Yeah, and that's what I was hoping you could you make 2 different Barberas. So in the club selection, for many of you, we put the Barbera d'Alba Superiore, which is called Ciabot du Re, which is Piedmontese dialect. Can you say it correctly?
Yeah. Well, you were pronouncing it correctly. Okay. Ciabot du Re, yes.
So what does that mean, and how is that Barbera Superiore different than your normal Barbera?
So Ciabot du Re, it's not an official menzione geografica, it's not an official cru name. So if you look at the Barolo area map, you will not find it. It's just how local people from La Morra is calling that specific little area of Annunziata. And that's because in this area, there is what we call a Ciabot in Piemontese, in our dialect, which is normally it's a small shelter, very simple, that used to be made in the middle of the vineyard to store tools to work or to just rest during, you know, a storm.
It's like those little tool sheds in the middle of the vineyards that you guys have seen when you visited.
Yeah, once they were really common, now there's a little bit less, but you can still see them in the middle of the vineyards. And normally they're very small, but that specific one, the Ciabot du Re, it's very big. So it's called the shelter of the king, since it's extremely big. And that's why we decided to call this wine this way, because nowadays we use 3 different vineyards, all very close, all in Annunziata or very close to our estate. But the first one was the Ciabot du Re one. And it's different from our Barbera normale, our Barbera classica. First of all, because of the vineyard. For this Barbera, we do a selection from the 3 best parcels of Barbera that we have. There are 3 very well exposed parcels. One is west exposed, west exposed. That means it gets the sun in the afternoon, which is pretty strong. Pretty strong. So, and for Barbera it's very good, because Barbera loves warm condition, loves a lot also warm vintages. And the other 2 are southeast exposed. They're in the middle of Nebbiolo for Barolo vineyards. They're really nice, also in terms of age of the plants, because they are between 40 and 55 years old. The first one, the oldest one was planted by my grandpa. So it's, you know, older plants are already producing less than a young plant. So especially for Barbera, that is very important, because that means that we already got naturally very concentrated grapes. Of course, we still do selection in July, August, but most of the work is done by the plant, which is very good for the quality.
Yeah.
The Barbera normale.
Oh, sorry. Can I just interrupt real quick? I noticed that the Barbera is actually 15.5% alcohol. So you can definitely tell it gets a lot of sun. And the Barolo as well is 15%. So, and both of these are very cool, not very cool, but cooler vintages. So it was actually surprising to see that alcohol percentage for these vintages, but probably for that reason that they're already very concentrated, older vines and in good exposures.
Yes, and also in the latest year, we started to have higher alcohol percentages, even because sometimes the phenolic ripening is not perfect, even when the sugar level would be perfect to pick. So sometimes you have to wait a little bit more than what you will do just in terms of sugar level, and just to reach the perfect tea. But of course, at that point, the alcohol level is going up. And yes, in the last year, the Barbera Superiore is always more than 15. It's always between 15 and 15.5. Okay. And also for the Barolo, normally we are between 14.5, 15, with the exception of the 2014, on which we had 14 degrees on the Barolo Classico.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have any questions about the Barbera before we move on maybe to talk about the Barolo? It seems like most of you have Barolos with you today. Okay. But just the taste and flavors of the Barbera. Elena, what are you tasting right now? Because I wrote some tasting notes and put some up on the tech sheets, but I wrote up what I'm tasting. What are you tasting right now? You're the expert.
So, if you can call me so, but yeah, definitely. So on this Barbera, we use is the wine on which we use more new oak with the aging, because Barbera is a variety that is able to support new oak, but of course you still feel some oak, I believe, which I think it's very well integrated in the wine, because you have a lot of ripe red fruits. Like, I'm sorry, I'm switching in Italian because I don't know how do you say it in English? Like prugna, like sottospirito, you know.
So you mean like prugna secca or prugna fresca?
Prugna, not secca, but like really ripe.
Okay, so very ripe plums, stewed fruit. I agree. I think the Barbera, just the color of it, if you can see, like, I don't know if you guys can see in okay, here's the big nice glass for Barolo, and I don't have much here, but it's very dark. So it also gives you a lot of darker flavors. I found like nutmeg and spices, and surprisingly floral too, I felt like, but definitely dark fruits in the palate. Like I got a lot of violets in this. So a beautiful wine. I think it's got a lot of power to it. So I noticed that if you kept it in the glass, just like the Barolo, it really starts to integrate even like in 10-15 minutes. So Brian, like I know you just wrote me a quick message, like, should I throw this in a decanter for the Barolo? So it's always a good idea to give these wines some air, and definitely eat a few nibbles with what you're drinking, because they're big wines. So, but they're very beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it's of course a very, very big, there's a lot of things going on. I feel it's pretty acidic in the mouth, which is nice. And this is also coming a little bit from the freshness of the year, because 2018, as you were mentioning before, was not an extremely warm year. Nothing compared to 2017, for example. But I like this freshness in the mouth, honestly. It keeps you want to drink more, which is fun in a wine.
I had pizza for dinner, so this was great with I mean, it was still an important wine with pizza, but all right. So let's talk about the Barolo. It sounds like a lot of you guys are drinking Barolo, and you can talk for days about Barolo and the cruise. So this is, like I said before, really unique, because this is actually the first vintage you ever made a Barolo from the other side, from Serralunga, which was different for you guys. So I guess my question is, what differences did you find when you were trying to make this wine, and how is it different in general than your other La Mora Barolos?
The first difference that we noticed was, of course, working in the vineyard. Because the vineyard was planted by my grandpa, but he was using, in the vineyards to when you plant them, you put poles also every 4 vine plants. And my grandpa was putting them in wood. So they were kind of getting bad. And so we had to replace them. So the first thing that we noticed is that the soil is really hard. So planting the pole was a really hard job there, because there's a kind of limestone, but really, really hard, which is not letting the pole also going down. So the first thing we notice is that there's not much clay. What we notice also, for example, in 2017, is that Serralunga is the place that suffered more from the dryness. It's a very different soil. The plant is struggling a little bit more, is definitely producing less on average. Also the grapes are smaller than the one that we got in Annunziata, for example, where the soil is a little bit more fertile also, a bit more generous, let's say. So that's the first thing that we noticed, because of course we spend a lot of time in the vineyard, first of all. In the cellar, what we did is we work mainly with barrique, so small oak cask. But that year in 2013, that was the first vintage of Cerretta, we bought an additional large oak cask because we wanted to experiment a little bit with the aging. And we did a little bit of the wine in a large oak cask and a little bit in barrique, and we wanted to see what we liked the best. But in the end, of course, we blended it, and we thought that once blended, so the part aged in barrique and the part aged in large oak cask, that's what we liked best. So that's what we kept doing. It's also another difference that we notice is that also the harvest time is different. Normally there's around a week difference between the vineyards we have here close to the winery and the one in Serralunga. That is always the last one that we harvest, which is kind of good and fine because you have time also to create space in the winery for the new grapes coming. So those are the really first thing that we immediately notice. And of course, we noticed a great difference in the glass, but that came after a little bit.
Okay, I'm just gonna show real quick. Let's see, I would like to show them on the map mans where La Mora and Serralunga are. So let's see. Where am I going for this? I always get confused. You can keep talking and I'll try to find.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Can you guys see this?
Yes, personally I can.
Okay, can everybody else see the map? Yeah, okay. So,
yes.
All right, so this is our beloved Barolo area here. So we have Serralunga, you can see is the town down in the bottom left-hand corner, which is the town we're talking about where the vineyard Cerretta is. So this is a beautiful day like we've had with the mountains popping up. And then you'll see La Mora, if I stop here, is straight in front of you. Can you see the red writing La Mora? Okay, so remember La Mora is on the, what we would consider like the western side, and a very high elevation, as you can see. Serralunga, so where their faraway vineyards are, you can see is on the other side of the valley, which is here where the red markings are. So this is actually the road that's leading up to that is the road of Serralunga, and her cru, so that single vineyard that's on your bottle of Barolo is called Cerretta, and their vineyards are here in that red area. So Elena, I think, aren't your vineyards on towards the bottom, like on?
Yes, that's exactly where they are.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, you know, where the booths, not the big one, the smaller one. Yeah, okay. Below that one. And also we have a little parcel which is higher up.
Okay.
So yeah, but that's the place. Yeah. And of course we use the highest part, the higher elevation for the Barolo Cerretta. Of Barolo Cerretta, we produce around 2,000, 2,500 bottles every year. So we just use the best part. The rest is blended in the Barolo Classico. Totally in Serralunga, we have 4 hectares. In the Cerretta, we have around 2, but we just use about a little less than half a hectare for the Barolo Cerretta, for the single vineyard. The rest,
very small production of this wine. Mm.
Yes. We prefer to keep it smaller, but to really use just the really best crops, because you know, when you have a lot of different single vineyards, and as I was mentioning you, we have 5. We have Cerretta, and then we have 4 in La Mora. But of course, you want really to make them special, so really use the best part of that vineyard. which doesn't mean that the rest is bad, but it's better to be blended and to make a Barolo, which is a little bit more balanced, a little bit easier to drink when it's young, while with a Barolo single vineyard, you want a little bit more complexity. You want something that is suitable for the aging, that you can, I won't say forget in the cellar, but almost, which is, yeah, more, maybe also a little less pleasant when it's young. I mean, not as balanced in the nose, maybe a little closed as well, with tannins which are a bit astringent. And well, now I have the 2013 in the glass, and 2013 was a pretty classic vintage, which I will compare a little bit to a 2016, even if I think that 2016 was, my feeling, at least in the glass, is that it's a bit, how do you say, a bit more balanced, I would say, compared to the 2013, when it was at the same stage of aging, so just 1 year in the bottle. Right now, of course, also 2013 start to be a bit more balanced. But I think blind tasting, personally, I would not say it's a wine with 4 years in the bottle. It's still quite, it's open in the nose, finally, starting to be a bit more expressive. But in the mouth, I still feel great acidity and also pretty rich tannins.
I felt the tannins are rich, but at the same time, it's still quite drinkable to me. Like it feels, maybe that's because I tasted the Barbera first, which is just like so big and chewy, and then this just seemed like really light and fresh. And for me personally, and then I would love to hear your guys' feedback about what you're smelling and tasting and what your impressions are. I can always identify almost every single time when I smell iron and like clay, like wet clay and iron, and I guess you would call that minerality. For me, that's Serralunga 100%. When there's like this specific mineral, like ferric note that for me, that's the first thing that I smelled. It wasn't so much fruit as I had expected, but as it's been sitting in the glass, it's even gotten darker in color and a little bit fuller, and the fruit is starting to shine through, and it's very pleasant. I think it's really even a Barolo that I'm drinking with no food, and I'm loving it. So let's see, what else did I taste? What are you guys thinking? I would love to let's get some of your feedback. Go ahead and just open up the mic and give us some of your impressions, if you feel like it. Definitely licorice, almost like a bitter black licorice to me was really coming through, both in the nose and the palate. Kind of like a lifted nose, like it's very ethereal and elegant at the same time.
Just a couple days ago, I had a bottle of Barolo Gattera, 2013 as well. And in the nose, it was still very fresh, which was pretty nice, pretty surprising. But in the mouth was much rounder. So of course you could still feel the tannins, but they were much like very silky tannins. So they were there, but here personally, that's my personal feeling, I feel tannins a little bit all over the place, like also from the teeth until the really end, until the everywhere. So I think personally, but that's very interesting because for us, especially for me and my brother, it's pretty exciting because we started to work in the winery quite recently, and this is something that we are discovering year by year. We don't have anything older than 2013, so we're still kind of discovering the aging potential of this vineyard. So it's also for us a discover. So it's really interesting also to hear your experiences with this wine and so on. Personally, but that's really my personal taste, I would still maybe wait, a couple years. Mm-hmm. I'm lucky because I have bottles to open relatively often. So, but definitely, yes, it would be maybe interesting to try it again, let's say in 2-3 years, and see how it's going with the tannins.
But I also think, like, if you guys are opening it right now and had a glass because it's daytime, by the time, if you just let it sit and then had it with a nice dinner, I think it could also, you might be surprised how much it changes over the course of a few hours and might be really pleasant.
The funny thing is that Cerretta is not even one of the more austere vineyards in Serralunga, because among vineyards in Serralunga is one of the more fine,
softer,
yeah. But still, I've tried like some Vignari Onda, for example, 2016, which is a comparable vintage somehow to 2013. And the tannins there were incredible, like incredibly rich and incredibly complex. And this is a vineyard a little bit more gentle, let's say, but still, there's definitely a huge difference between the wine that we produce in La Morra, for example. But you can already notice immediately when you pour the wine in the glass. Here we have also a more intense color. It's the color of Nebbiolo, but somehow it seems like it's more concentrated, but we don't do anything different. So that color, that kind of intensity is all coming from the vineyard, which is also surprising. Yeah.
I have a question from someone who had stayed at your B&B, because do you call it an agriturismo or a B&B, or just apartments?
Agriturismo, yeah. Okay.
Agriturismo. His name is Fishman, I think, and he's from Singapore, so it's like 4 a.m. in the morning right now and couldn't join us. But he wanted to ask you how your family has changed your winemaking techniques in time. So I guess without getting too much in like modern and traditional, which can be a little tiring to talk about sometimes, but I probably you've kind of stuck to the same style, but made some slight changes. And so maybe you could talk to us about, I don't know, he was saying the de-stemming, soft pressing, your oak aging, a little bit how you've changed in the last 10, 20 years, or maybe you haven't changed at all. I don't know.
Well, no, there's been some change, because, for example, well, I'm talking about the last 30 years in this way, but when my father took over, for example, the maceration process was extremely short. We were talking about 2-3 days maximum. Right now, we reach up to a week, 10 days. So already there, we make, of course, it's still a short maceration, but it's definitely longer than what my father used to do. And also, we changed a little bit the oak, the kind of oak aging we do, because we still mainly use barrique, but the amount of new oak decreased in years. So nowadays, we buy every year around 20 barrique, and we have 370 in the winery. Of course, we have different vintages stocked, but just to give you an idea, we buy very few of them. Mainly, they are used for the Barbera Superiore, and we use around the 20-30% for the Barolos. And from 2001, we also added a big oak cask. Right now, my brother would like also to start maybe experience a little bit with some Latini for the maceration.
But maybe I'll just explain what the Tini are real quick. So they're the old traditional like conical vertical barrels that they used to use for fermentation. So this is kind of coming back in style again, but the new Tinos are normally temperature controlled and better quality oak. So a lot of, seems like that's something really that softens the wine. Instead of being fermented in stainless steel, it's kind of a nice compromise because it can be neutral, but allowing the wine to micro-oxygenate. So that would be really interesting to compare.
Yes. We just need to convince my father. So that's the most difficult thing. yeah, and then with the pressing, we never really changed because we have this press which is already doing a very gentle kind of pressing. Within all the vinification part, we try to be as gentle as possible with all the machinery we use, because the grape is a pretty delicate material, so you cannot be too harsh on that. But that's we didn't change like extremely, but of course there were slightly change towards the year. And of course, with me and my brother getting a bit more experienced after some years of practice, there will probably be, I don't know if big changes or small experiments, but definitely there will be, you know, something going on in the next years.
But your dad is still there. I see him every time I go there, so he's still very involved, right?
Yes, he's always saying, no, now it's all yours. I don't have to deal with it anymore. But then it's not like that.
He has the last say, maybe. So if anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and write them for Elena. I'm just going to ask one last question. I think then we'll kind of wrap it up. So La Mora tends to be associated more with the modern style and the small, which means especially these small French casks, the smaller size, while, for example, Serralunga and Monforte tends to be a more, what they would say, traditional, the big botti, which is a more neutral Slavonian oak. So maybe, and in fact, with your Cerretta, which is from Serralunga, you had the idea to do it partially in the big barrels. So I think maybe that gets confusing to people. Like, what is it about La Mora that, is it something that enhances the flavors of the wine with the barrique, or is it the tannins, or what is the reason that there's this difference?
Well, you mean why in La Mora we tend to use more barrique rather than large oak cask in general?
In general, yeah.
I think the main reason why that happened is because most of the people that started to make wine in the late 80s, beginning of the 90s, got a great help from Elio Altare, which is one of the first people that started to innovate the way of making Barolo, the way of making wine in the area. So for example, my father, talking about him, but talking about a lot of friends of him, he really learned from Elio, because especially in the first 2-3 years, he was coming in the cellar to help him with the vinification process and with the aging process as well. Honestly speaking, is definitely a little bit more hard work in terms also of filling the barrique or emptying them. And definitely in the beginning, there were, you know, they were experimenting and so on. Probably in the very beginning, the amount of new oak was a bit, you know, over, like too much. That's why right now we don't do that anymore. For us personally, it's a bit also what we like in terms of style. But it's also very, honestly speaking with you guys, very easy to manage small quantity of wine, because when you do work with small plots and you want to keep it as single vineyard Barolo, but you don't have huge quantities, barrique are definitely easier, because not every year you have the same amount of wine. So, you know, one year you may have 6 barrique, one year you may have maybe 8. But you can manage a little bit easier. With a big one, you must fill it, and you cannot leave, you know, a part of it empty or so on.
But I feel like when you use a barrique, it might be easier for that reason, but it can be harder because it's harder to take care of all the barrels and keep them clean, and it's easier to enhance also flaws in the wine. So where if you have everything mixed in a bigger volume and a big barrel, the little flaws might get hidden a little bit better with the volume. So yeah, there's definitely always pros and cons, but
yes, maybe it's also that we are used to work with barrique, and so for us it's kind of easier somehow. to manage, but definitely there's, you know, easy and not easy and difficult thing with both methods, I would say.
Excellent. Okay, well, I'll leave it to you guys to ask Elena anything you're thinking or wondering about, and then if not, we can close it, and I look forward to hearing about how the wine is developing throughout the day for you guys. Thank you, Elena.
Grazie mille, Anna, davvero.
Great job. You did a great job.